Think your Kiwi passport is a golden ticket to world travel? Think again. While New Zealand consistently ranks among the world's most powerful passports, there are places where even this mighty travel document becomes completely useless. I'm about to show you 10 countries that have essentially slammed their doors shut on New Zealand citizens. And trust me, number 3 isn't just surprising, it's absolutely shocking. From mysterious disappearing visa applications to outright rejections, these restrictions aren't just political, they're personal. And what's happening in brief pause for effect? North Korea. Well, that's a story that'll make your jaw drop. 1. Syria. Syria's relationship with New Zealand passport holders is complicated by the ongoing civil war that began in 2011. While theoretically possible to enter, the New Zealand government has placed Syria under its highest travel advisory. Do not travel. The Syrian government maintains strict control over visa issuance, and New Zealand citizens face extensive background checks and often rejection. This stems from Syria's general suspicion of Western-aligned nations and security concerns. Even humanitarian workers with New Zealand passports must obtain special permissions through international organizations. The few exceptions are typically made for journalists, though this requires extensive documentation and government approval. Syrian embassies in neighboring countries often don't even process visa applications from Kiwi passport holders. The restrictions were tightened further after New Zealand's support of various UN resolutions regarding the Syrian conflict. For context, before 2011, New Zealand tourists could obtain visas relatively easily, but the political landscape has dramatically shifted since then. 2. North Korea. North Korea maintains one of the world's most restrictive entry policies, and New Zealand passport holders face significant hurdles. The DPRK doesn't maintain direct diplomatic relations with New Zealand, making visa applications exceptionally challenging. All visits must be arranged through approved tour operators, and independent travel is strictly forbidden. Tourists must be accompanied by 2 North Korean guides at all times. The application process involves intense scrutiny, and many Kiwis report waiting months only to face rejection. Interestingly, while North Korea doesn't officially ban New Zealand passports, the practical restrictions make it virtually impossible for regular tourism. Those few who do get approved must surrender their phones upon entry, can't take photos without permission, and must follow a strictly controlled itinerary. Business visas are slightly easier to obtain, but still require invitation letters from North Korean entities and face heavy restrictions. 3. Iraq. Iraq's stance toward New Zealand passport holders reflects complex security concerns and limited diplomatic infrastructure. While there's no official ban, the Iraqi government rarely issues tourist visas to New Zealand citizens. The process requires sponsorship from an Iraqi citizen or business, extensive documentation, and security clearance from multiple government agencies. The restrictions intensified following ISIS activities in the region, with Iraq implementing stricter controls on Western visitors. Even for business purposes, New Zealand passport holders must obtain approval from the Ministry of Interior, a process that can take months with no guarantee of success. The Kurdistan region of Iraq is slightly more accessible, but entry through Baghdad remains problematic. Humanitarian workers and journalists face fewer restrictions, but must still navigate a complex bureaucratic process. The New Zealand government itself strongly advises against all travel to Iraq, citing extreme risk to security. 4. Libya. Libya's current political instability has created a virtually impenetrable barrier for New Zealand passport holders. The country's visa system is largely dysfunctional due to competing governments and ongoing civil unrest. Even when visas are theoretically available, the process is incredibly unreliable and often dangerous. New Zealand citizens must obtain approval from multiple authorities, some of which aren't recognized internationally. The situation is complicated by the absence of a functioning New Zealand embassy in Libya and limited diplomatic relations. Business visas, once relatively accessible, now require extensive security clearances and local sponsorship. The few exceptions are typically made for oil industry professionals or humanitarian workers, though these require coordination with international organizations. Libya's Coast Guard and Border Control often don't recognize visas issued by competing governmental factions, adding another layer of complexity. 5. Yemen. Yemen's ongoing civil war has created an almost complete blockade for New Zealand passport holders. The country's visa processing system has largely collapsed, and entry points are heavily restricted. Even before the current conflict, Yemen maintained strict controls on Western visitors, but now it's practically impossible for New Zealand citizens to enter legally. The few exceptions are granted to humanitarian workers with United Nations clearance or journalists with special permits. These permits require approval from multiple factions controlling different regions of Yemen. The security situation has led to the complete withdrawal of New Zealand diplomatic services from Yemen. Those few Kiwis who do receive permission to enter must navigate complex security arrangements and often require armed escorts. The restrictions extend to both air and sea entry points, with many ports and airports either closed or operating under severe limitations. 6. Somalia. Somalia presents unique challenges for New Zealand passport holders due to its complex political landscape. The country's federal government, based in Mogadishu, lacks full control over all regions, making visa policies inconsistent and often unenforceable. New Zealand citizens face rejection not just because of official policies, but due to the absence of functioning visa infrastructure. The autonomous region of Somaliland has its own entry requirements, but these aren't internationally recognized. Even if a visa is somehow obtained, the New Zealand government maintains its strongest do not travel advisory for Somalia. Business visas require invitation letters from registered Somali companies and approval from multiple government departments. Humanitarian workers must coordinate with international organizations and often need additional security clearances from local authorities. The few journalists who gain entry typically need to arrange extensive security details and obtain permissions from various regional authorities and clan leaders. 7. Afghanistan. Following the 2021 Taliban takeover, Afghanistan's visa policy toward New Zealand passport holders has become extremely restrictive. The previous electronic visa system has been suspended, and there's currently no clear process for tourist visas. The Taliban government maintains strict control over foreign visitors, with particular scrutiny of Western passport holders. New Zealand citizens face additional challenges due to New Zealand's previous military presence in Afghanistan. Business visas, while theoretically possible, require extensive documentation and approval from multiple Taliban ministries. The few exemptions are typically for humanitarian workers with international organizations, though they face intense scrutiny and restrictions. Female travelers with New Zealand passports face additional restrictions, including mandatory male accompaniment and strict dress codes. The absence of New Zealand diplomatic representation in Afghanistan further complicates any visa applications or emergency assistance needs. 8. South Sudan. South Sudan's relationship with New Zealand passport holders reflects its status as the world's newest nation and its ongoing internal conflicts. The country's visa system is notoriously unpredictable, with frequent changes in requirements and processing procedures. New Zealand citizens often face extended delays or outright rejection, even with complete documentation. The visa process requires approval from multiple government agencies, including security services. Business visas demand local sponsorship and detailed justification for entry. Humanitarian workers need additional clearance from the Relief and Rehabilitation Commission. The country's limited diplomatic infrastructure means visa applications often get lost in bureaucratic limbo. Even when visas are issued, entry can be denied at borders due to sudden security concerns or changes in local authority. The few New Zealanders who do gain entry must register with local authorities within 24 hours and face restrictions on movement between states. 9. Venezuela. Venezuela's political and economic crisis has severely impacted its visa policies toward New Zealand passport holders. While there's no official ban, the practical difficulties make entry almost impossible. The Venezuelan embassy in New Zealand rarely processes visa applications, citing technical difficulties and system updates. Those few applications that are processed face lengthy delays and frequent rejections. Business visas require invitation letters from Venezuelan companies, which must be approved by multiple government ministries. The process is further complicated by Venezuela's complex currency controls and economic regulations. Tourist visas, while theoretically available, are rarely issued. The few exceptions are typically for humanitarian workers or journalists, though both categories face intense scrutiny. Even approved visas can be questioned at entry points, and immigration officials often require additional documentation not mentioned in official requirements. 10. Iran. Iran maintains one of the most complex visa systems for New Zealand passport holders, reflecting broader geopolitical tensions. While not officially banned, Kiwi travelers face extensive background checks and frequently changing requirements. The visa process involves multiple stages of approval, including screening by Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Intelligence. Tourist visas require sponsorship from approved Iranian travel agencies and detailed itineraries. Business travelers need invitation letters from Iranian companies, verified by multiple government departments. The process is further complicated by international sanctions affecting banking transactions for visa fees. Female travelers face additional requirements, including appropriate dress code confirmations. Interestingly, while group tours have slightly higher approval rates, individual travelers often face deeper scrutiny. Journalists and photographers require special press visas, which are rarely granted and involve extensive background checks. Even approved visas can be revoked without explanation, and entry can be denied despite having valid documentation. These restrictions highlight the complex interplay of global politics, security concerns, and diplomatic relations affecting international travel. Remember, travel situations can change rapidly, so always check official advisories before planning any trips to these regions.